Well, welcome. There are two people on the show tonight that if you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, basically, if you're a Milford resident, you ought to know these people because their actions really do dictate the nature and the culture of where our children spend 6 to 8 hours a day. You know, I always get a kick out of the fact that as a parent, especially as I got to high school, I was lucky to get an hour or two with my kids every night and a few minutes in the morning, yet when they're in school for 6 to 8 hours. What these two gentlemen do and their committees really does influence what our children learn, how they learn it, and what they grow up to be. So hats off, and why don't we start with introductions?
Mike Walsh, Chairman of the Milford School Committee.
And Bob Tremblay, Superintendent of Schools.
So we're looking, obviously, the first thing that always comes out, but we're not going to start with Woodland, because everybody keeps driving by saying, oh my God.
It's impressive though, isn't it?
That's amazing. But let's look at the other end of this. You know, somebody is still taking care of our 8th graders at Middle School East.
Most definite.
You want to start with who's going to be the acting principal?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting going back to my roots as a principal. So Dr. Kevin McIntyre, who's Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, he and I decided...
Now, Bob, is he still here after you told him he's going to have...
Oh, yeah, he didn't have a choice in the matter. No, he didn't have a choice. He's under a contract. So I told him, I said, Kevin, you and I are going to go down to East next year, and we're going to take the helm. We're going to bring the best assistant principal we've worked with, that's Bob Toki, and we're going to bring Bob over there with us to help us.
Quiet and shy Bob.
Yeah, quiet and shy Bob. He, you know, it's amazing. And what Bob loves to do is, you know, he's retired, a lot of years in the Milford schools, for people who know him, just a great guy. He just likes to walk the hallway. And, you know, in our business, the best way you can manage is just walking through the halls. You head off issues, you make interactions with kids, even kids who are going to maybe be difficult. I mean, it's a tough age that socially, and 8th grade's a real pivotal age. But if you really care about them and invest in them and hear them, and Bob does all those things, you're going to have a really good school environment.
He had a knack of somehow there was a line there, and you could see the kids. 7th, 8th graders, you know their job is to push that line.
Absolutely.
But somehow this wasn't an Obama thing with a line in the sand. You knew if you crossed it, it wasn't going to be shy and quiet Bob talking to you.
Well, it's simple with that, Al, is he gave respect. So he gets respect.
That's right.
That's truly, when you watch, you know, Bob Toki in action, he's very respectful to whoever he's addressing, and in return he gets the same, you know.
Yeah, this is a big year for us at East, and that's why we, Kevin and I, want to be down there. On the one hand, it keeps us connected to kids, which is why we do what we do. It's about kids, but also this is a big transition year. So you mentioned Woodland School, and that's moving grades 3 and 4 from one part of the Woodland campus to the other. We also have to move grade 5 from another school, pack them up and move them to the new school, and then move 8 down to Stacy Middle School.
Too many school systems would take the easy way out and say, okay, we're just going to let this transition year almost be a neutral or a bye year. You know, I'm impressed that you and the good Dr. McIntyre have said, hey, wait a minute, this year, every year is critical. You know, we got a bridge year here, and we're just not going to let the kids skate by. We're going down there to make things happen.
And it's got to be, we want it to be the best year Middle School East has seen. It's a celebration of all their years as a school in this district. And those kids deserve a great school year. Not a year where we just give up and say, oh, it'll be fine.
We'll pick them up when they get to 9.
No way.
Fill it with substitute teachers.
Yeah, not going to happen. We have 180 days to get the job done and to make sure that these kids are ready for Milford High School. And I say Milford High School because they might have an interest in BBT, they might have interest in somewhere else. We want them to go to Milford High School because we have a great program there. And I don't think we do a good job selling that. I don't think, you know, and it kind of leads me to another part of this discussion about, you know, this pivotal year for grade 8. How can we do a better job letting our kids know all the great offerings Milford High School has? Because, you know, Blackstone Valley Tech does a great job on a 13-town roadshow. But Milford just takes for granted the fact that, of course, Milford High School is there. It just assumes that. We don't give our kids a tour of Milford High School. We do bring some students down, but do we do a really good job of, and we found that out last year when Kevin McIntyre and I went down to East. We pulled all the kids together who were going to a school that wasn't Milford High School. We broke them into 4 groups, and we had 4 facilitators. I was in one group, and we asked them similar questions. You know, why did you choose to go? Some of it's legacy. Some of it's my mother, my father, my grandfather all went to St. John's, and so I'm going to St. John's. Okay, well, there's a convincing argument to be had there. Or I'm going to Blackstone Valley Tech, so I really want to pursue a trade in HVAC. Or I'm going to go to Norfolk Aggie because I love horses, or whatever it may be. But some of the other answers we got were, I didn't really know what Milford High School had to offer. Blackstone Valley Tech came down and said how many great programs they have, so I applied there.
You know,
that's
it's
the
funny
sort of thing we
because you
can
think
do.
about it, the 8th grade is always our biggest class. Right? If I remember, 80 kids, you'd have a class of, 360 or something, and then 80 kids would either go off to Catholic private schools, to other private BVT. And I always wondered why we don't have an Expo MHS.
Yeah, well, we are.
Just
Hence
bring
this year.
all the 8th grade parents early into the gym. Meet the science teachers. Look at what we offer in science.
Well, I think one of the key reasons for Bob and Kevin as the superintendent and assistant superintendent to do what they're doing is they're also sending a message to the children that they care, that they truly care. Their jobs are very important and they're very, very busy, but they're going to take time out of their day, every day, to be part of that class so that the kids that are going in there, of course, they're smart enough. They know that school's going to be closing. They're going to be transitioning into the new school. But the superintendent and the assistant superintendent care enough about us that they want this year to be an important year for us, and they're going to be part of it. And that's a great message to send.
Well, I remember the first time you got up and started waving the baton. The band or the orchestra parents were just full of themselves. They were so excited that for the first time, somebody paid attention to the band geeks.
Sure.
I laughed because I said, I have no idea if he knows what he's doing or if he's just up there waving.
Yeah.
But the effect, the message was, we just don't care about a segment or 2 segments. They're Milford kids. They all, they're no more special or less special than any other Milford kid.
Right. I think I've said this on the show before. My first year that I got elected, Bob called me up and he said, would you do me a favor? I said, sure. He said, would you come to National Art Honor Society night with me tonight? And I said, National Art Honor Society? What's that? He says, well, it's the honor society for the art students. He says, nobody ever comes. He says, would you come with me? And I was amazed at the work, the artwork, and now we display it every year in the hallway. But afterwards, the number of parents that were so affected by
Sure.
the superintendent and a school committee member took the time
To be there.
It was just, and that's one thing, and I'm not tooting his horn for him, but that's Bob has the ability to, I've watched him go into a kindergarten, connect with kindergarten, and I've been with him in meetings with parents, and he can connect from all
But
levels.
even at football games,
Yeah.
you had all these people from the administration there, and then at halftime, crickets. The poor band guy, the marching band, they're all out there busting their backsides, and there was nobody there to say, hey, by the way, we do care about you just as much as the kids who were here before
Yeah.
and the kids who will be here after.
Yeah. Well, if
Absolutely.
you remember the year ago, so we had a little controversy going on. Bob called me up and he said to me, he goes, wait till you see Thursday night. I said, why? He says, well, I know that your son was athletic and you were involved in athletics. He says, but wait till you see the art and the music parents. I said, oh, okay. I walk into the high school and I can hear a string quartet playing, and I'm like, what? I go around the corner and there's a little group right outside the TRC. I have everything I can do to get into the room, okay? And then I sit down, and the whole room going off into the library is all parents. And I looked at Bob, he just winked. There's a message for you.
And it's amazing because you take for granted the talent. I remember when they used to have, when they bring all the schools together, the orchestras,
Oh yeah, the vertical concerts.
the vertical, oh my God, because, you remember the first time with the violin where my daughter will hate me, but it sounded like she was pulling the tail off a small farm animal. And all of a sudden you got to watch them. You know, Billy Moffat, the whole crew going up, and then you got to the high school, and it was wow.
That progression. So you have this hope as a parent to say, oh, if they just keep practicing, they could sound like this.
Yeah, they can say, I mean,
it's going to be 10 years, but it's going to be great. You know, and back to middle school east, the thing I think of, you know, there's been some, you know, people being critical of, but usually you have a full-time job as a superintendent, how can you be the principal as well? And it's not just me, it's Kevin, it's Bob Toki. But the message there is there's times that you have to lead the troops from the back, and there's times you lead the troops from the front. And in my view of this, when there's a time when you're transitioning and there's an identity of middle school east. It's an autonomous school. It's very unusual, as you both know. To transition that, it's got to be done with kid gloves. It's got to be done in a way that makes everybody feel as though they're invested in the solution. And I'm going to be helping carrying boxes if I need to be to move those teachers seamlessly, and that's what I've committed to. So the school committee was good enough to say, hey Bob, we understand this year you have a lot on your plate with the transitions with the new school. That's your goal this year. Just do that.
Yeah, don't
just
do any extra
happen.
programs.
Yeah, there's not right now. Everything else can just sort of it's blossoming on its own. Let it steep and do what it needs to do. But focus on the transition, which is really the biggest thing I've seen in
think
Milford.
people don't understand. I mean, even like a Stacy. I mean, how big of a deal can it be? You got 3 classes, right?
Yeah, right.
And then you sit there and say, but wait a minute. The bottom end is being moved. So all of a sudden you got to deal with how tall are the desks?
Oh yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, wait a minute. 5th graders had these desks. Now you're going to put 8th graders at them? Probably not going to work.
About science labs for 8th graders, and you know, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, so you don't have to, you know, to not upset the apple cart too much. And then there's the physical movement of packing boxes and giving time for staff to do that. So there's a lot of care that has to go in, and there's been a lot of thought already all last year. But this is the year. You know, I think about the school developing the budget, developing the calendar. It's all done. We're about to start, you know, whenever this show will air, but this is August 27th. We're about to start school next Tuesday on September 1st. We're done. 2015, 2016 in my mind is over.
Sure.
I'm already on 2016, 2017. So everything that I'm doing this year is already for the next school year. And that's kind of a sad place to be, but you really sit back. I get about 2 weeks to sort of sit back as a principal and just kind of watch what we did last spring sort of come to life. And did we budget everything correctly? Do we have the staff we need? Are the staff that we hired as great as we thought they were when we hired them? Are they
Some of it's
out?
emotional too, Al. You got to think about it. You got the 8th graders this year now that are going to develop the fear factor of going to the high school.
Right.
And then you got the 7th graders. Some of them who probably will be excited because they're, you know, the way the program is, but some of them are going to be upset because they wanted that standalone.
6th graders are going to be ticked because they were the alpha
Yes.
group.
They were going to be.
Now all of a sudden they're beta. They got to wait a year. Well, I mean, think about it. Spruce Street School, going across that road to the wall to go to Stacy back then for 7th and 8th, that was like traumatic. Now, what is it, 10 yards?
Yeah.
Right, from the library over? But, oh my God, I'm going into that big building. And then you're an 8th grader to walk across, you know, it wasn't even the playground, another 10 yards to go into the high school. All of a sudden you went from, for a year I've been alpha group. We're the big kids. Now all of a sudden we're the freshmen. I mean, the emotion was amazing. Any of us who went through it can remember how scary it was.
Anxiety levels are high.
I mean, at least the 8th graders knew, you know, this was it. They were going to move.
Right.
They already knew they were going to move to the high school.
And there's just that culture at middle school east of it being this one grade schoolhouse. That's
Right.
the autonomy. They love it. The staff love it. The kids love it. You know, so there's a shift you have to be mindful of there. But you know, it's exciting. It finally, for the first time, puts the right configuration in the Milford schools. K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. It's just
Right.
it's just
necessary.
good educational philosophy.
What do you think the biggest challenge is going to be with middle school east?
The transitioning of staff, you mean, or the actual just everything, all things considered?
If you sit there and say, okay, you've got a year from now,
Yeah,
if all goes well, they're going to be gone.
right.
They'll be in Stacy.
Well, one challenge is just the organization of 8th grade is really sort of a precursor to high school. So you have classes that are more or less leveled. 110s, 120s. You go to middle level, you're clustered, which is sort of it goes back to a heterogeneous, homogeneous argument. Have kids of like abilities together, or is it sort of a mixed bag? 8th grade is that sort of tracking, if you will, back in the day, where 5, 6, 7 is a bit different. So we have to wrestle with, are we going to keep an identity of being departments, or are we going to be teams?
But now, Bob,
That's going to be, for me, that's the biggest, that's more than the facility stuff, that's the
7th
biggest
grade.
challenge for us to reckon with.
we were all worried about what courses the kids were getting and can they get into those higher level 8th grade? Because you did for the first time.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like when we were in school. I mean, when I was there, you had the 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 2C, 3A. God, I still remember 40 years later. It was horrible.
See how
'Cause
education could haunt you?
Yeah, you painted these kids
Right.
with a
Yeah.
brush. Oh, you're in 3B or you're in 1B. Or,
Right.
Right.
right? And you sit there and say, does it really matter? But now you got one school. So in 6th and 7th grade, I'm kind of red, white, or blue.
Right.
And now all of a sudden they're going to move to 8th grade, and I'm 110, 120.
That's just the challenge. All in the same house. Are we better off doing something? And you can have mixed models of that, but you really have to get to a point where you're preparing kids for high school, where they can take, an algebra, pre-algebra, algebra, track, trigonometry, and kind of follow that path, or something more remedial if they're not ready for that. So that's going to be on the curriculum side of the house. That will be one of our bigger challenges, and then also having the staff buy into that. So we have transition committee that's been set up to have these discussions. I think that's, for me, you asked what's the biggest. That comes to mind as being one of the biggest things, which is probably something that most taxpayers in town wouldn't even think or care about. No. But from our view as educators, it's a huge piece.
You don't even think about it until you have a 7th grader.
The right. Then,
But Al,
then that's what you think about.
Yeah, there's an old saying, you play golf with a great golfer, you play good golf, and almost the same thing in education. Sometimes you wonder if you put some of these children in some of the more advanced, the tougher classes to take, would they strive to follow the other children, and would they learn, become better learners?
And I think the balance, and you have to rely on your staff, is you don't want little Johnny pushed too far above his ability, because then it can backfire.
The frustration level.
The frustration
But
level.
I do agree that to the extent you can, play up.
Yeah.
Play up.
If you can take a B to a B plus, level, okay, maybe you can't take a C level kid and throw him in the middle of all the A level kids.
Right.
But anything we can do to nudge higher.
And it also builds their self-esteem. When they know they're achieving something, their self-esteem is going to come up. So maybe if they're the B student because they have a little bit of low self-esteem, but they become a B plus student in a different classroom, their self-esteem will rise as well. And they could do even better.
And I remember you could do mixes because it wasn't, as my daughter reminds me, she believes I have the grammar skills of a dead bovine. As far as my liberal arts education at Holy Cross, she says, no, they failed you. You still can't write. But when it came down to the STEM side of the game, that's where I loved and I did pretty well. So not everybody has to love vanilla.
Right. You find your niche.
God created 32 flavors of ice cream so everybody could have theirs.
That's right.
Right.
I just happen to like vanilla.
Yeah.
But you think about it and you say, okay, if you can push a kid who's going to be a writer into an advanced English, into an advanced literature class, how much more could you want?
Right.
Right.
That's one of the challenges that we put out to our teachers, and we continue to impress upon them. And this year, no different. On the first day of school, the message is going to be teaching all students. And we have a guest speaker who's going to talk to our staff, who's disabled, and is going to speak about sort of some of his struggles going through school and what his educators have made him feel. And it's going to be a powerful reflection for our staff. It's going to be a tough way to start, but the message to be had there is, how can we reach every single child where they're at, bring them to that next level, or excite them about coming to school, even if it's not about going to science class, but it might have excited you. It may not excite a kid who gets up every day because he likes playing the violin, or who loves coming to school because he gets to work in our bistro program. There's what makes every kid kind of tick. And the great thing about getting back to East this year for Kevin and I, and it was just great, we were standing on the front steps literally from 9 o'clock this morning till noontime, just stood at the front door and greeted every single kid and every single parent that came through and connected with the kids. One kid had his headphones on, and you could look at that as saying, hey, take your headphones off, you're coming into a school. Or you could do what I said. It says, hey, what are you listening to? Mind if I listen? He had me his headphones, and I listened to it. We had about a 10-minute discussion about his preference of music. And it turns out, well, I have an 8th grader at home in my own house, so I sort of understand how an 8th grader mind works and how they think. And he and I had a great discussion, and that might impact in some way his first day of school, saying, geez, that guy, that whoever he was, maybe he doesn't even know who I am, took the time to listen to my music.
8th grader.
I have an 8th grader, a 7th grader, and a 3rd grader.
I remember when I used to try and stuff them with hot dogs when they were tiny.
And Mountain Dew.
And Mountain Dew.
At the football games.
At the football games, it was great.
Al was
extra carbohydrates. Here, now go home.
I tell my kids, no, you're not eating the game. He goes to the snack concession, comes back with Mountain Dew and hot dogs.
To Bob's point, every year it's senior night. Of course, we bring in a guest speaker, former Milford High School graduate, and I apologize, I can't think of his name, but it was a young Vietnamese man, and he said that he hated math, he hated science, but it was the art teacher that told him, because he was very gifted in art, and it was the art teacher that said to him, if you try, you do your math, you do your science, you can come into my classroom even if it's after school, and you can do what you love to do. And today, the night that he spoke at senior night, he's the lead graphic designer for the New York Times.
Wow.
And he spoke to the kids about it, is, yeah, maybe you don't want to do this, but there's a trade-off somewhere else. And that's part of what you got to do. But if you do this, you'll be able to do this, is what you really love. And that's a great point.
But see, the culture. I mean, my daughter works with a lot of kids in the bistro. And she explained to me, we were sitting around one night, she goes, Dad, my job is to get every kid to their potential. They may not all have the same potential. They may have different potentials in different directions. But as an educator, if I've gotten Sally to a B, and that's the best she'll ever be, I've done my job. I'll always try and push her to a B plus, but if I get her to her potential, now whether that be a bistro kid in certain activities, our next Nobel laureate in science and chemistry, or somebody who's going to win a Pulitzer by writing.
Right.
Or just kids like my daughter who fell in love with Milford and didn't want to leave and came back.
Yeah.
And stayed. That to me says, hey, these educators, you can always find the one, like any organization. I'm sure that if you look at all the mechanics, there's probably one that isn't as mechanically inclined as others.
Right.
But if you don't look for the one, boy, the other 99% are pretty cool.
And Al, I've had this discussion before. Milford is a very unique town. I have it in my own family. My son bought a house on South Central Street. My daughter's over on Meade Street. When we went to Mendon and built that huge complex in Mendon, people thought I was going to go to Mendon and buy a house. I said, I'm not leaving Milford. And they said, why? I said, I don't know if it's the people. Sacred Heart Church, a Leavers Market. Milford is a very unique town that if you get involved, it's very welcoming to you and you're very comfortable.
I laugh because I told Lexi she's finally a true Milfordian. She's 4th generation Milford, and she lives within 2 miles of her mother.
Is that the criteria?
That's what I've been told. Some say 3 generations, but the 2 miles within your mother, can be bent as long as it still has the same zip code.
I was told as long as your parents were born here and you were born here, you're in the club.
There you go.
I heard Dr. Capisi had to deliver you.
No, you have 4. We had that discussion with Phil Sermacoli. Back then, it was Capisi, Mastriani. I mean, you go through, there were 4 physicians, and everybody in Milford came through one of those 4. So, you didn't have to just be Dr. Capisi.
Okay.
But now, I think it's critical, especially at 8th grade, because we do undersell what we offer.
We do.
I've had people who we've moved here, and, they hear Milford and they look at the test scores. And they say, oh, they don't compare to a town here, a town there. And it was funny because Tommy Davern was the one who woke me up. Because when we were on the Parents' Council in 8th grade, I asked him, I said, Tommy, what's the deal? All we hear is how we underperform. He goes, yeah, because you don't look at the data. So what do you mean? He says it's very bimodal. Our top kids stand up to any town around. But when you blend in, some of the recent immigrants and some of the other kids, if you just look at the average as a Gaussian curve, it's not, it's bimodal. There's two curves. So if you're coming here, you can get a good education. If you're a top kid, you can get a great education. You know, the biggest thing that every principal's told me is get involved.
100%.
You know, get involved. You know, if you don't like the PTO stuff, get involved in the parent council.
Well, I say this to Al, is we offer so much. So on the flip side of that, if your son or daughter comes home and says to you as a parent, they don't really have what I want, there's something wrong, because that's how much we offer in the Milford Public Schools. You know, it's huge. It's huge. Get involved. That's the thing. Get involved.
The only thing I still worry about is we set up the VOTEX to take care of people like my father, who academically, he would never shine. Came over from Portugal. He had his 4 years of school in Portugal. You put him in front of a library with books, he wouldn't be stellar. Put a tool in his hand and he was an artist. So I worry about the kids who really are super, you know, talented. But if they don't have the academic grades, how do they get in? They can't get into a BVT.
No, they can't, because the demand is, you know, the supply of students is, you know, is just too great.
So Michael's done wonders elevating the grade level and everything at BVT, but what happens to the kids like my dad?
Well, it puts it back on us to create pathways for these students, opportunities. We've done that with hospitality and tourism management. This year we are building a bank branch inside Milford High School, and working, I'm not sure which, but we did an RFP, and one of the banks came forward, and they're funding it, they're staffing it. We'll be
Even
working.
Better, no budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
We won't have to come see you.
You know, and all of our programs can work through that bank branch. That'll be at Milford High School. You know, we're expanding our robotics programs. What's really interesting, though, is we have a Pathways program. This is for students who are, it's a credit recovery or dropout prevention program. These are kids, for whatever reason, coming to school for academics isn't really their strong suit. They know they have to get it done. They want a diploma. But at the same time, they want to be motivated. That's what the Blackstone Valley Tech or vocational education does. It motivates them. They have that shop experience, the industry experience, and then they kind of get through the academic experience because they look forward to the other experience. So how can we customize that? So I'm actually working with Mike. We have a student, we're going to make him interview with Mike in probably the next couple of weeks, who's very interested in being an auto mechanic. And he'll be motivated to bring up his grades and do well in school for an internship. So we've set it up where we're going to interview him. Great partnership with Imperial. We'll send him up there. He can do his internship there, and we'll have someone supervise him.
That to me is exciting, because you turn around and say, Kevin and all of you and Imperial do so much for Milford.
They do.
Here is something that you can take a kid who, why do I have to learn math? Well, you want to be a mechanic? You'll realize that you do need to know math.
Yep.
But it'll give him an incentive.
Right.
That, hey, I love having a wrench in my hand. Great, you want the good wrench? Bring up your grades. And what a life lesson.
Well, and I've always said, Al, that, and having two children have gone through the Milford schools, is there was always a group at the top that, as you say, excelled. Then there was this big, happy-go-lucky group in the middle that just always got through, went on to schools, always done well. But I've always said to Bob, since I got elected, is there's always that poor group at the bottom that's struggling. Those are the ones we got to go. Those, you know, we got to help them all, but this is where our focus is. And this Pathways program that he's come up with this is the key to it now. Now we can take a student and we can say to him, listen, you have to do this and you have to do this, but you're going to be able to do this, which you really, really love, and could possibly turn it in later on into a job opportunity. You know,
Here's a life lesson.
right.
You know, you may not want to work, but you want to eat, you want to wear clothes,
Right.
you got to work.
Right.
And get a decent paying job, you know, a lot of these trades. And this particular student came to us because he applied for, and every so often I'll pop in on the hospitality and tourism management program kind of caps out every year at 20 students. So it becomes competitive to apply for that program because we have students who are in year one who work at the Doubletree, another one of our partners, and students who are in year two, it's a 2-year program, are now working at the Courtyard by Marriott. So we actually, by my role on the Milford Area Chamber of Commerce, we leverage area businesses as the vocation. So Milford High School becomes sort of the hub, and instead of having all the shops in Milford High School, we go to the shops.
And that's wonderful, because if
So
you
it's
think
real
about
life. It's real
if I
world.
want to be a mechanic and I've interned at Imperial, Well, chances are Mike may hire you anyway, but even if you can't hire him, I mean, it's got to be better to have experience in Imperial than to say, yeah, I fixed cars at Milford High School.
Yeah, but what we do is we, like right now at Imperial, we have two. We have one at the collegiate level out of Mass Bay. We have one out of the high school level out of Tri-County. Now that's at Chrysler. We have BBD students in the other two locations, and we actually put them with a seasoned technician. They don't just go out on the floor by themselves. They're actually in classroom, but now in real life. Wow. You know, with the technician saying, okay, this is how you do that. Go over there and do that. You know, learning every single day, hands-on.
Well, let me put you guys on the spot, because one of the concerns out there is we got all these kids from Texas. You know, a lot of them have never had any education. Some have had very limited. Must be dragging down the resources for the typical kids. Fact or fiction?
Well, there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that when you put them in the aggregate. So what we've done, it's kind of talking what you just described before, the sort of bimodal. We've realized that we have a population of students, and we don't have many students coming up from the detention center in Texas. I'm not even sure how many we have this year. We had a handful, 10, 15
But
or
it's
so.
not thousands like
No.
10, 15 kids that had come up. And, just to put the rumor mill and the myth to bed, these are kids coming up with full immunizations. They're not coming in here to,
Oh, these aren't health risks.
No, these are kids coming up. They've somehow gotten across the border. They're in these detention centers, and then they're sent this way. Right or wrong, they're here. They're Milford kids. We educate them. That's what we do. That's what I'm in the business of doing.
And they have to be, excuse me to interrupt you, important, people to know, they have to be sponsored to be here. So that means that, like, they don't just open the detention center and say, hey, you're going to Milford.
Right.
They have to have a relative, a family, friend, somebody who's going to
Out
sponsor
of the
them.
300 towns and cities in Massachusetts, my understanding is 32 received kids and 8 received kids.
Yeah.
Because they already had families and...
Communities
Right.
like Lowell had to open up a whole new school because of the swell, that they had in their community. But what we've come up with, and I give credit to Jen Lancaster, our English Language Learner Program Director, who's just top shelf. Jen has developed this model at the high school. It's called a SLIFE program, or a SIFE program. It's Students with Interrupted Formal Education. And she's created almost a world within a world. So she has a teaching staff at Milford High School who are all content certified in every subject, who are specialized with working with students whose first language is not English. And they're going to work with these kids sort of as a sub-environment within the high school, and then as the students, and they'll have electives and things, but their core content, and as they develop the language acquisition, they'll begin to be mainstreamed out into the classes. And that will help us with not our averages in terms of performance, but it'll really, more importantly, give the kids what they need coming in the door at 16, 17 years old, with having no formal education, maybe since first or second grade. So we play catch up. So it's important that we put our best and our brightest staff on those kids from day one. And that program, thanks to the support of this town, thanks to the support of the Finance Committee and town meeting, we've been able to build that program to do that. And I think we're going to just see some tremendous
I think
success
it's
in that.
important for people to understand we put extra money in
We did.
as a town, because, at town meeting it was discussed that, okay, if you put the extra $300,000 in, you're encouraging more of these kids to come. If you take it out, they won't come. And I mean, I never understood that, because realistically, your SPED and your ELL programs are dictated. So regardless of how big the pot is of money you put in, those two groups have mandates or regulatory requirements. If you don't build in extra money, it's the typical kids that are going to get caught.
The thing is, Al, as Bob explained it, the program works. For example, at St. Mary's, you look at most of the priests that are coming into St. Mary's right now are being ordained out of Colombia or out of Brazil. One of the first things that happens when they hit the United States, when they hit the Worcester Diocese, and they're in seminary, they also have to go over to Clark for a year of English as a second language. And I was just with one of the fathers the other day that just got ordained, and he said, I can speak English, not that well, but I can speak it, I can write it, and over time now, I'll get better and better. He said, but when I arrived here a year ago, he said, I couldn't speak it and I couldn't write it. The program works. It's immersion. You immerse them into a group, with the teachers being, the immersion, and every day things keep changing and getting better. They're going to get it. They're going to
I
get
think the
it.
important thing is the town meeting members stepped up.
They did.
Oh.
There was an extra 300 grand put in, knowing that Part A and Part B, that's dictated.
Yeah.
So if you didn't put the 300 in, it's not the ELL or the SPED kids that are going to get cut. Their programs are mandated.
Right.
It was going to be the typical kids of Milford.
Right.
Yeah, and that's because, Alan, you say this all the time, people in Milford care about people in Milford. They can say what they want. People sometimes, they say things that aren't right or they complain, but when you go to town meeting and you sit there and you watch, people in Milford care about Milford people. They really, truly
And that was
do.
my point. I don't need the state or the feds to tell us how to take care of Milford kids. Milford people know.
Absolutely.
And they've always taken care of Milford kids. We
Absolutely.
didn't need mandates, and no matter what, we will do what's right.
Yeah.
Because they're our kids.
If I've had one, I've had a dozen today grown people tell me that Paul Raftery, God rest his soul,
Uncle
used
Paul.
to drive around and pick kids up in the morning on the way to school just to make sure they got to high school.
My junior year, he left North Bow Street, went to Mystic Lane every morning, picked me up, and then drove back to the high school to make
that
sure
isn't
that
caring-
I was always on time.
If that's not caring about Milford kids, then what is?
Now, people drive by some activity on North Vine Street,
A little bit.
and all of a sudden all you hear is, oh my God,
Yeah.
what's going on at Woodland?
Well, it might look like the Natick Mall is being built.
Yes.
Yeah.
Impressive.
It's impressive, and if you have a chance, I've had a chance to walk that site. The construction site. It's just unbelievable the vision of these guys. We have a great team. First, you have Aldo Chakey and Jonathan Bruce chairing and vice chairing the school building committee, and these guys are there every day. You think they're on payroll with Shaman. They're there every single day, and their purpose is to make sure that Milford is getting what it bargained for.
Well, that was the joke. We didn't have to buy copper wire. We just threw a penny in between Aldo and Jonathan,
They can
and all of a
stretch it.
sudden we had plenty of wire.
They're doing a fabulous job. The whole school building committee is really excellent. So Shaman's building it. We, as of this, August 27th, the last meeting I had this past week, we're going to have the keys handed over to us on July 28th of 2016. So that gives us a good solid month before school starts. They may even be ahead of that, but that's even better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be in August, September, possible move-in. There's still going to be the building that has to be raised on the other side once the project's done.
Wait a minute.
But getting into that,
You're going to
school-
have a month?
a month. But there's nothing really to move in terms of all those staff. They're going to basically pick up will have moved their personal effects and walking into a brand new building, all the
School
new
committee's
furniture.
going to help them.
Yeah, we're going to have movers do it. We're not going to necessarily ask you.
Well, no, but I sit there and say, oh my God. I mean,
A month is better than a week.
well, it just
take
amazes
it.
me because, when people look at the size, it's like, you building a Taj Tremblay up there. But they don't quite understand that at 1,000 kids,
Yeah,
it's almost as big as the high school. I mean,
It's-
not size-wise, but
it's a fairly small footprint, but it's 3 stories, but beautifully designed with the sunlight coming in. They've like innovative stuff. And there's a stairwell, for example. There's a stairwell goes up 3 stories, but they've built it so the way the steel beams are, the landings of each stairwell, it's some of this uninterrupted light. And so in each of the stair treads have these little holes in them. So you have this light just pouring through, that will be pouring through. The architectural work that HMFH did on this is just beautiful. The work, Shamit's just, those guys
so
are
now
just
we're
great.
going to have where the old soccer field is, a 3-story woodland building.
Yeah, it's already there. Steel's done.
Oh, it's standing
It's-
there right now.
Yeah,
And you're going to have the old building,
which will be a new soccer field.
which will be, but for a while, you're going to have 2 buildings.
Not for long. Well, once we move everybody over, the next step will be just to get rid of the other school. So we're in that process now, but to watch this project, the tricky part there is the flow of parents and
I was going to
school
say, I
buses
think
for the
what
start of
everybody's
school this
worried
year.
about is, okay, so you're going to move my kids in, and then you're going to demo the school while the kids are in session.
On the other side of the property.
Yeah, it's
But still, you got big trucks and,
No,
you
but
know,
you see how these guys work.
Yeah.
If you look at it now, I mean, they've literally built it's so innovative. They've built all these access roads that allow for, and we don't have construction traffic and school traffic. There's no.
they're
traffic.
never coming to, it's not like
No.
mom comes here, then the dump truck goes there.
No, this construction zone area. And we've really put a lot of thought into making sure we could evacuate kids from the building, the existing building, if there was a fire emergency. Thinking about where we position our crossing guards. For example, if you come down North Vine from Highland, there's a walkway. I think it was sort of created by students just cutting through the woods. Eventually, we paved it. We didn't put a Jersey barrier there. We put a 10-foot, 12-foot chain link fence there to say you're not coming through here anymore. Keep on trucking all the way down the sidewalk. We're going to have a crossing guard to cross you safely into the school. So we've put a lot of thought into how students are moving, where our crossing guards are going to be on day one. We've driven the whole site. And of course, like I said, you have Aldo and Jonathan and I drove the site the other day to see how it was progressing to make sure we're all set for day one. Of course, they were there, and it's looking great.
So September 16, on schedule.
Yeah, August 16. Well, July 16.
But I'm saying the kids
come back. I
Nobody-
I'm not sure what we
nobody
are. for
cares
July
about
16.
anything but the kids.
Yeah.
We just assume
I don't know if
that,
it's a September or an October or an August start date for 2016. I haven't looked that far yet.
But it's
in and around there.
in and around Labor Day,
Yes.
1,000 new kids pile into the school. When does the old school go away?
I'm not sure the exact timeline on that off the top of my head. I don't know.
But within the year.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
most definite.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and that would be an isolated work site.
You know
So
what's unique too, though, Al, is that people don't realize in the town of Milford. Think about this: you have the Woodland School project going, you have the youth center renovation going, you have Godfrey Brook going on right now, and very shortly you'll have Consigli building this new office building on Summer Street. This town is abuzz with activity.
I think every street today has construction going on. I mean, I think every street in Milford has construction happening.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is. It really, truly
The only
is.
thing we're missing, like when I just came out of the Middle East, you see all the cranes.
Yeah.
We're not building skyscrapers, so you don't see. Like, if you go to an Abu Dhabi or Dubai,
Oh, yeah, it's just
you
the
see, the Middle East cranes everywhere. China, they tell me, is the same thing.
Skyline of cranes. Yeah.
Skyline, you can't miss it. But in Milford, it's all low.
Yeah, it's all low.
So you don't see what the Consiglis are up to or,
Right.
what's going on at Woodland.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
impressive, though. Very impressive. It's a great time to be in Milford. The other piece I wanted to add too is in terms of marketing and telling the town what we have. I've worked with Siobhan at the Chamber of Commerce, the president and CEO, to have a realtor forum. I'm going to bring together all the realtors in the area, greater Milford area, and make sure they're selling the right message to people. Because for as much as we say we spend on schools, and the town's been supportive of that, the value of your home is really directly linked, as we all know,
Absolutely.
to the quality of your schools. And I think it's important for us to get that message out.
And the
to
people we
community.
get, it's so funny because as new parents come in and they're looking at, 5 different houses in 3 different towns, the realtors really are the first impression.
Right?
How they talk about the school system
Right.
really has a dramatic effect on people's opinion of, okay, I like that house better here, but boy, that school scared me. I think I'll go there.
Right. And if you don't know, we offer a great robotics program where we do 3D printing at the high school now, or we have a Pathways program for kids as a dropout prevention, or some of the best special education programs pretty much anywhere in the state of Massachusetts, if not the country. If you don't know that unless you tell somebody that, and we have to get that message out because we haven't done that well.
Driving
It's
by
hard.
the high school, show them the new sports complex.
There you go.
Oh, we have beautiful
I
complex
mean,
there.
come on.
We've
That's-
expanded our middle school sports. We've added now
Soccer.
soccer, field hockey. We've added cross country.
That's why I
So-
say, Al, if your child is telling you it's there, it's
They're
there.
just not finding it.
There's
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
There's really
So
everything
now,
for
if I
kids.
take a 4-letter word that only has 2 letters,
Okay.
IT. Seems like it's become the 2-letter word that's the biggest 4-letter word in this town.
It's definitely a headache.
Fact or fiction?
Which part?
You don't know where you're going, how you're getting there. There's no plan. You're just off.
No, we do.
But
Yeah.
I keep hearing,
Fiction.
school has no idea.
Fiction. Anybody wants to see my plan, I'd be happy to share it. You know, I've shared it with the school committee, and we absolutely have a technology plan moving forward. In fact, Milford, I will say though, you know, the fact there, Milford as competitive as other communities with technology? No way. No way. We are lagging behind. But we are on a great path to have that network architecture built as of this year. We have fiber being installed in a week, and that will 10 times the speed of our current bandwidth. That's important because if we have devices that people want to use in school, they got to be able to have the internet connection to do it. And it's not going to be this kind of nifty, you know, we're not looking to have, you know, instead of taking notes on my notepad, I'm going to take notes on my iPad. It's beyond that. It's how can we get one kid in this class working with a teacher one-to-one, meanwhile another kid's taking a class online with another instructor, maybe in another country in Mandarin. It's that kind of thing. It's not using technology to replace notebooks. It's using technology to educate.
I don't think people understood. It's like when we were kids. Remember when they built 495? You had the woman out there with the shotgun in front of the chicken coop saying, "You won't come through." And everybody said, "Why do we need such a big highway?" And I remember driving on it, and there'd be a car here, a car there. But
Now get on it.
but think about where our economy would be, Milford, without Fortune Boulevard. And let's face it, it's there because of 495.
Without two ramps.
But, you know, I think about this whole fiber loop. I mean, we're lucky you guys got a 60% reimbursed.
Yeah.
But if you don't lay down 495 now, then in the future, you're just going to fall further and further behind.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And we've already jumped on it. You take our partnership with Milford TV, where we're sitting for this show. So we've we have a great video production program, probably one of the most in-demand programs at Milford High School. Kids do a great job. If you see our lip dub video last year, it's just an example of what our kids can do. That program we've relocated now to be sort of near the back courtyard of Milford High School, but it puts us on a direct feed to here. So now we can do our morning announcements and basically live and send it out live through TV, through Milford TV. We already do things that are streaming live. So it gives us kids a real production experience as well. So we have all that going on, and now we have the bandwidth to do it, to really grow that
I remember
program.
when we had the old studio at Comcast, you know, and I don't want to take anything away from Paul Revere when he installed the cameras and the equipment, because they probably were state of the art when Paul Revere was around. But it was hard to get the kids interested to come down and volunteer when, I mean, they're looking at these cameras and this soundboard and video board. And it was like they knew it was 20 years old. They knew the technology. They're not going to learn a lot
Right.
that they can translate.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you come down here, and I'm proud of this studio. And we got all these high school kids who are running our cameras.
Editing stations all in the back. And it uses the same technology we use in our school, which is really key. You know, if they're using Final Cut or whatever they're using for a software platform, they can come here and use it. It's transferable. You mentioned the IT four-letter word. You know, one thing I think about, you know, of course the schools have a plan, but one part of the plan, is a town part of the plan, is the library. The library's got to have a network strong enough to mirror the school's programs, because so many of our students, if they don't have technology at home, they need to be able to go someplace to access the online content. So the libraries are going to be a good partner
And Bob,
of ours.
I was one of the biggest critics, because when our director would show me this plan, I kept saying, "That's great. You've gone through the plan for the school. Somebody can explain to me how all the schools are going to be tied together." Okay, the kids who don't have the fancy schmancy computers at home and stuff, they walk from Stacy over to the library. Now what?
Right. Or the youth center.
Or the
I was
youth
gonna
center.
say, yeah, we are dealing with the same thing in the youth center.
You know, I mean, I remember when we begged Comcast, I had to beg Frank Foss to run a cable to the youth center, claiming that it's part of the school system, we're educating. That's where they do their homework. And we had one little cable that ran to the youth. It's not serious, it was better than nothing.
Right.
Back then it was.
But, you know, back then, it was
Yeah.
all we could get.
A lot of our students are tutored at both of those locations. And it's got to be, it is an extension of our schools. They have to have the same access to the same level of It's like kids being at home and they have devices and iPods and they have phones and they come to school and all of a sudden they're at a desk with a notebook and a pen. I mean, why am I here? I can go home and find out the same. You know what I mean? You've got to find a way to engage them that makes them want to jump out of bed in the morning and say,
Well,
"We're going
that
to
was
school
the
today."
media center. Remember when I asked my daughter, because the school committee wanted, the first time you wanted to lease all those new computers. And I went home and I said, hey, do we really need new computers in the media center? And Lex Simmons goes, no, as long as you don't want us to use them. I said, what do you mean? She goes, I can't do anything. I take my software here. The computers are so slow and the software is so antiquated, I can't use it.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden, we made that 3-year investment, and the kids were in the media center, and that's where you want them.
But you know, one thing that's important too, Al, is, and people have to realize, and we do a really good job at it, we know that eventually children are not going to traditionally want to sit behind a desk for 6 hours a day. And where you can really see that is at the Memorial School with Vinny Kizo's class. Vinny does a phenomenal job. He's got a whiteboard set up, and he's got this big rug in the middle of the class and in an area where he sits with his laptop. And he's teaching those students at certain times of the day. They're all comfortable on the floor. They're all looking at the whiteboard. They can go up. They can touch it. You know, they can try to explain to him, or he can go and explain to them. That's engaging in education. You know, that's where education.
Vinny's a teacher?
Yes.
Vinny's this big. I remember when he
Well,
was
he's this big now.
I remember when he was a freshman in high school,
Does a
helping out with the
phenomenal
technology.
He is an ace. He is such a talent.
But see, there again, there's somebody who grew up in our system
Yeah.
and now has come back to help.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And boy, does he help. But if you sit in his classroom and watch that and actually watch the children, that's engaging them in education, and that's where it's heading. And if you don't start setting the path for that in education, you're going to be behind.
So now we've got a plan to add the loop,
Yes.
at least to the school. It doesn't touch any of the town. But at least the school has a plan. We funded it. It's being done. Now there's another data point coming up for more funding, right?
Yeah, come this January, February, we'll be submitting the next E-rate application,
Next
which is the federal reimbursement of about 60% of what we spend on technology.
So we can leverage our money 3x.
Yeah.
If we do it smart.
It's just important we have a clear plan of what needs to be phased in at what's the next phase in terms of switches and access points, and that's the next piece that we will put
So I'll
into place.
put you guys on the spot. You working on getting somebody to do this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, to me, that's the next. I mean, it's great. You know, you heard that it only took 3.5 years to get a computer keyboard fixed a couple years ago. I'm being facetious,
Of course,
but it
yeah.
seemed.
When you say somebody to do this, like we already have, as Bob said earlier, we have infrastructure getting ready to be started in
September 8th. We'll be
September
installing
8th. So
fiber.
that's already forward, and we're already working with Kathy Perry for the grant for I believe it's March of 2016.
Yeah, I'm thinking, but I like to be a couple months ahead. Of
Yeah,
that
but
campaign.
we're already.
But somebody has to be in charge of this to say, this is what we need.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy goes get the funding. She does all the great stuff, but
So right now, we had that proposal that came through Wally. Wally Computers did this assessment for us, what we needed. What wasn't clear to us, the previous IT director, what wasn't clear to us is the scope of that work. Was what Wally asked to bring to us build us the best system you could ever build, or was it to, how can we make this work phasing it over 3 years? And that's what we have Wally coming back now, doing a walkthrough with our IT staff, school by school, to say, here's what we have, here's the shelf life that you have. So you have these switches. It'll work fine for the next 2 years, but in year 3, you best have that on a capital plan of some
see, I
sort.
would like to see
That's what we're developing
somebody come
now.
up with a 3-level assessment saying, here's the minimum and here's why.
We're in the process of developing that right now.
If we were Newton North with too much money, you know, $200 million to spend on a school and not enough to spend it on, we'd do this. The best possible.
Right.
Here's what makes sense.
Yeah.
And then have somebody who has no skin in the game. Because, you know, people are always going to look at Wally and say, well, wait a minute. I mean, there's a number of companies here, whether it be Wally, whether it be Retrofit, whether it be Worldband. Okay, Mike, you got your car salesman doing an assessment of what car I should buy. Boy, don't I believe it's going to come out something that Kevin sells? You know, maybe
Yeah.
not consciously.
But that's why it's so
Absolutely.
important. And as Bob said earlier in the show, the program from the state to have them come in and do the evaluation because they don't. They have no skin
But
in
see,
the
that's what
game.
I'm saying. I don't care if it's a state group, if we take some of the people that, I mean, we've got people in town who know how to do this, who do it for a living, for large companies. Let's face it, we're a $90 million, so we're a middle size. We're not a small company, town of Milford. We're not a major corporation. We're not a Waters Binion. But 90 million is a good little size.
Yeah.
So you get somebody who knows how to do that to look at the proposal and say, okay, this makes sense or this doesn't.
Right.
And if they tell me to buy a Chevy, I want to feel a little more comfortable if they're not employed by Kevin Meehan. Not that I'm questioning their integrity,
Right. Right.
but they've grown up in the Chevy dealership. Yeah, I believe they'll stay to it. I'd rather see somebody who has no skin in the game come back and say, yeah.
We couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's the objective look you need to have. But we're making our way with technology, and we're doing very well.
And I don't want to lose 60%.
No.
No.
It's like the Godfrey Brook where, okay, we only got 800,000. We had to come up with, instead of a matching, we had to come up with a lot more. But Chris Moran said it, I'm not sending money back to the state.
Right.
It's 800,000 we will spend sometime.
But what we've done is, as a school committee and as an administration, we've decided, we're going to take the high road, and we're going to do what we need to do to keep the schools moving forward, and try not to allow any of the chatter to slow us down or to get in our way. If other people want to be involved with us or want us to be involved with them, great. But we need to stay focused on what we need to stay focused.
Stay on the critical path. Listening to the chatter, I think, is a good thing because in all the chatter, there may be some valid points, but you can't let it derail you.
No, that's why, we were just meeting last night. I laid out a technology plan, so the committee's always up to speed on where are we on our timeline. We have to adjust that every so often, but it's important that you have a plan because we only, as I mentioned before, the urgency for the schools may be different than, the end user at town hall. I get 180 days.
Right.
If I don't have that technology that I need in front of these kids in 180 days, I've lost a year.
You also have limited
That's
patience
significant.
with the kids.
Yeah, and important to know, that was an updated plan.
Yeah.
From the original. So that's the second plan that we've gotten from the superintendent since it started.
In a couple of months.
Yeah.
Well, as always, I was told, and I firmly believe it, that if you want to get the best education for your child, get involved. Learn what's there. As Mike mentioned, if your child says, I want to do this, but it doesn't exist, call. Find out, because there's a high probability it probably does exist. And at the end, I've always said it, you're biased, and you tell me we got a great school system. The colleges in this area are the ones that really tell me we have a great school system, because when both my daughters wanted to go to college, they got in every school they wanted to go to. That, to me, is, that's where the rubber meets the road. So be proud of our schools, learn about what's at our schools, and if you have any questions, call the superintendent's office, because I'm sure he'll answer. Or go down to Middle School East, where he'll be hanging out with Mike McIntyre. It's an incredible program. There's nothing more to say, except good night to our 6 loyal viewers. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a better day than today. Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Not too long since I've been home.